Around 6 p.m. on Wednesday, Patrick Dunn arrived home after putting in an extra hour and a half at work to finish a wiring job assigned by his supervisor, Wayne Falk, earlier that day. His dedication allowed him to complete the task almost half a day ahead of schedule, despite working tirelessly throughout the day, resulting in sore muscles. His wife, Glenda, had left for a 3-day seminar in Columbus that morning, leaving him with the opportunity to focus on work. Although he had initially planned to join her, they had a cruise booked for spring break and the tickets were prominently displayed in their china cabinet. Surprised by the absence of a message confirming her safe arrival, Patrick decided to call Glenda. He dialed her cell phone from their home phone, and she answered after just 2 rings, expressing delight at his call and mentioning she had been about to call him. Patrick wasn't surprised she knew it was him calling as her home phone displayed his number. "You know I've always had a knack for reading your mind, honey, so I'm assuming you made it there safely. How's traffic? Hope your car is still in one piece?" He chuckled, anticipating her defense of her driving skills and picturing the annoyed look on her face, imagining she'd stick her tongue out if they were face to face. The possibility of snowfall in early January concerned him a bit. If she drove, he'd be happy. If she flew, he was relieved she answered quickly. She laughed, assuring him everything was fine. Traffic was light, and she easily found the Sheraton Hotel with the help of the map he printed. "You know I'll do anything for you, darling. Nothing's too good for my Glenda," he said. He had asked for the day off to join her, but she quickly declined. "No, you're not coming," she said firmly, then explained her desire to wait until spring break for a trip together. "Yeah, I know, just teasing, Glenda," he responded, though her firm rejection bothered him. "I'll be a good boy and stay home," he said, laughing, unwilling to let her have her way so easily. He noticed the relief in her voice as she said, "Glad to hear it, Patrick. It'll be a boring few days with seminars lined up. We wouldn't have time together anyway." "You think I'm reading your mind, Glenda? Need to talk?" "Oh, you reminded me. Can't find my travel bag with sewing kit and stuff. Maybe it's in the bedroom or car trunk." "Sure thing, babe. Hold on, let me grab the cordless." He dashed upstairs, spotting the bag on the dresser. "Found it," he said into the phone. "Careful with buttons and lint." She sighed in relief, mentioning a nearby store for replacements. "Gotta go. Registration's open. Busy week ahead with presentations and dinners, but we'll have Saturday evening together." "No worries, hun. Worked extra today. Should make it Thursday and Friday. Call me if you can. I'll do the same if anything comes up. See you Saturday for dinner." After exchanging pleasantries, Patrick headed downstairs, reflecting on Glenda's recent behavior. Despite her rejection of his joke about joining her trip, she'd been acting oddly for months. Hungry and distracted, he ordered pizza. With almost 40 minutes until delivery, he changed out of his work uniform and relaxed with a beer at the kitchen table. Overweightness wasn't a concern thanks to his active job. Since Glenda wasn't a pizza fan, he indulged himself. Leftovers would be lunch tomorrow, easily reheated at work. He spent an hour watching a news program on TV, but found himself drifting back to thoughts of Glenda and her recent change in behavior. It troubled him that she objected strongly to him joining her on her trip. Glenda, 35, was tall, slender, with long dark hair and eyes, working as a sociology professor. Proud of her success as a junior faculty member, she mentioned having more classes than others, but had a teaching assistant to help with grading and advising tasks. When the fall semester began, she mentioned her TA, Anthony, a graduating senior, who took on some of her responsibilities. His name came up occasionally, but not lately. In mid-November, she discussed upcoming seminars during the New Year break, initially agreeing to him joining. However, after 2 weeks, she changed her mind, preferring a trip during spring break. Reluctantly, he accepted her decision. During Christmas, seminars weren't a topic as they enjoyed the holiday with family and friends. Glenda received envelopes with training materials, quickly sending back her registration. Eager to travel, she began packing days before New Year's Eve, her organized nature shining through. Returning to the bedroom after 8 o'clock, he planned to resume reading a book left on the bedside table. Seeing Glenda's bag, he moved it to its usual spot in the closet, noticing it rested atop her journal. Married for 8 years, he rarely glimpsed her diary, kept hidden away. He had once jokingly asked to read it, but she firmly refused, deeming it personal and private. They never discussed it again, and in their 8 years together, he had only glimpsed it a couple of times, before she quickly locked it away. Patrick suspected Glenda wrote her journal entries in her college office, or possibly at home while he was at work. Their schedules didn't align. She was usually home when he left and back by the time he finished. Returning the bag to the closet, he picked up the journal for the first time in a while. The 6-by-8-inch book, an inch thick, was bound in red leather, secured with a latch and brass lock. Patrick realized the journal might hold clues to Glenda's recent behavior. Instead of returning it to the dresser, he took it downstairs to the brighter kitchen. Examining it closely, he noticed only a third of the pages showed signs of use, suggesting it couldn't be her only diary for 8 years' worth of entries. There must be older volumes elsewhere. After a brief pondering, Patrick realized Glenda's closet was the likely place for her earlier diaries. They each had their own closet, and he had never explored hers. Heading upstairs, he searched for 5 minutes before finding a shoebox on the top shelf, containing a stack of red leather diaries. He returned to the kitchen with his find. Notably, each diary had a small white sticker on the spine and was numbered 1 through 6, while the current one was unnumbered. Embossed on the back cover of each was the name Coombs, a local specialty store. All 7 locks were identical, lacking any distinguishing marks. Patrick wondered if they all used the same key. Curious, he grabbed the phone book and quickly found Coombs' specialty's number. With it nearing 8:35, he wondered if they'd be open, considering many downtown stores stayed open late on Wednesdays. After 2 rings, a young woman answered, "Coombs Specialties, how can I assist you?" Her tone sounded genuine. Patrick inquired about red leather diaries approximately 6 by 8 inches as a gift. "I think I know the book you mean. Let me check," she said, pausing for about 3 minutes. Upon her return, she confirmed they had 2 in stock. Ensuring the store was open until 10 p.m., Patrick hurried there, hoping to obtain a diary and possibly the key to unlock them. The odds were slim, but Patrick knew attempting to open the locks would likely damage them and earn Glenda's lasting reproach. Within half an hour, he was heading home with a red leather diary and key in his bag, despite its $60 price tag. He saw it as a small price to uncover his wife's worries. He considered giving the new diary as her birthday gift, envisioning her concealing illness, as she had with an abnormal PAP test result before. He also speculated about workplace conflicts among college faculty, aware Glenda preferred to handle such matters independently. Another possibility lingered in his mind, one he struggled to push aside, the idea of Glenda having an affair. Reluctant to entertain such thoughts, he focused on other potential explanations. Despite their physical differences, he shorter with blonde hair and blue eyes, she tall and slender, they had known each other since high school, even dating briefly. After high school, their paths diverged, with Patrick becoming an electrician apprentice and Glenda pursuing higher education. They reunited in college and quickly married after her graduation. With Patrick established as a master electrician and their home purchased, they planned for a larger house and discussed starting a family, deciding that Glenda would stop taking birth control pills by the end of the school year. Back home, Patrick wasn't entirely confident the new journal's key would fit. He found it in a small envelope in the diary box, appearing too small. He realized he should have asked the salesman about the key's compatibility. If it didn't fit, he'd abandon the attempt rather than search for Glenda's hidden keys. 5 minutes later, he sat at the kitchen table with a stack of diaries, contemplating whether to use the key on Glenda's latest journal. Concern for her health and persistent curiosity urged him on. He hesitated, fearing he might betray her trust. Eventually, he picked the lock, the key fitting perfectly. As he flipped through the pages, he found Glenda's recent entries, dated the previous day, filling most of the page. He quickly perused the neat handwriting on the page, his expression draining of color as tears welled in his eyes. Moving to the kitchen sink, he absent-mindedly squeezed his soda can, causing it to overflow onto his arm. Eventually noticing the mess, he cleaned himself up and moved to the living room, placing the diaries on the end table. Turning on the lamp, he settled into his chair with the 7th journal, eager to uncover the truth behind his shattered perception of his wife and their life together. Instead of reading in reverse, he opted for chronological order, hoping for answers. Tempted to confront her at the hotel, he dismissed the idea, fearing a losing battle or emotional breakdown. The first page, dated early June, marked the beginning of Patrick's search for clues within Glenda's diary. Despite finding contentment in her life, career, and marriage, none of the summer entries shed light on the shocking revelation from the last page. By early September, however, he found a crucial entry that hinted at the answers he sought, prompting him to read it twice. On September 8th, Glenda wrote about meeting her new teaching assistant, Anthony Romano. Describing him as slightly taller with black hair, dark eyes, and a short beard, She noted his impressive qualifications. Patrick searched the diary for further mentions of Anthony, but found nothing in the subsequent entries. Glenda seemed content but slightly anxious about handling a large class with over 100 students. On September 15th, Glenda wrote about Anthony assisting her in her large class, answering students' questions while she prepared lecture materials. She observed that her female students seemed fond of him, comparing him to Leonardo DiCaprio. As Patrick read further, mentions of Anthony Romano became more frequent, prompting him to scrutinize the passages more closely. On September 20th, Glenda noted that classes were proceeding as usual, with a few students dropping out due to difficulty. She observed Anthony watching her during lectures from the front row and planned to assign him more work. On September 24th, Glenda mentioned working on a reading assignment when Anthony visited her office, helping with the task efficiently. She also expressed her intention to discuss future plans regarding children with Patrick, marking the first mention of this topic. By September 30th, Glenda noticed Anthony's persistent attention during lectures, despite her disapproving glance. Female students approached him for questions, showing more interest in him than in her. Despite this, Glenda felt pleased with her students' progress and the pressure she felt as a full professor. While subsequent entries omitted mentions of Anthony, Glenda remained optimistic about her classes and expressed her desire to discuss family plans with Patrick after her first year as a full professor, planning to start trying to conceive at the end of the school year. On October 8th, Glenda excitedly shared with Anthony her decision to start a family with Patrick after the spring semester. His supportive reaction led to an unexpected hug in her office, though she gently reminded him of their surroundings. October 10th. Glenda felt uneasy when Anthony locked her office door during a visit, but he complied when she requested him to unlock it. His brief stay left her questioning his intentions. October 11th. Anthony returned to assist Glenda, expressing a preference for mature women and apologizing for locking the door the day before. Though happily married, Glenda found his attention flattering, entertaining thoughts about his interest in her over younger women at the college. October 13th. Glenda anticipated Anthony's visit to her office but felt disappointed when he didn't show up, wanting to discuss his interest in mature women further. October 15th. Despite hoping Anthony would stay after the students left her office, he left before she could engage in further conversation. October 16th. Glenda finally spoke to Anthony, who expressed a preference for mature women based on his past experiences. She failed to assert her boundaries and regrets not condemning his behavior, now haunted by the encounter. Patrick found this entry troubling, realizing Glenda didn't react as he expected. He left the diary open and fetched a new can of soda before returning to read more about the situation with Anthony. October 20th. Just before leaving work, Anthony unexpectedly entered Glenda's office, disregarding her request to leave the door open. He confessed he had been thinking about her constantly and requested a longer kiss, claiming it was for his birthday. Feeling uneasy, Glenda agreed to get rid of him. Later, she realized his birthday was in July, feeling tricked but laughing it off. She worries about his intentions and resolves to be cautious around him. In the following entries, Anthony is absent as Glenda focuses on grading tests and essays. Patrick finds it strange that Anthony didn't participate, but the journal offers no explanation. October 30th. Today, something happened that's difficult for me to put into words. Anthony came into my office, locking the door behind him, and pulled me towards him without giving me a chance to protest. I felt ashamed for not stopping him sooner. When I finally pushed him away, he insisted I enjoyed it. I asked him to leave, but he just smirked and said he'd see me tomorrow. I'm struggling to handle the situation with Anthony. I feel trapped and unsure whether to confide in Patrick. Worse, I can't shake thoughts of Anthony from my mind. Patrick, reading the entry repeatedly, realized he was filled with anger he didn't know he had. November 2nd. I finally stopped worrying about Patrick noticing anything unusual. The first night was tough, but he didn't suspect a thing despite my anxiety. It made me realize how easy it is to keep secrets from him. November 6th. It's been days since I was alone with Anthony. Even when he's in class, he still stares at me, making me feel uneasy. I wonder how I'll react if he comes to my office again. November 8th. Anthony visited my office today, but others were present. He kissed me quickly before leaving, making me uncomfortable. Despite that, I'm considering attending a seminar series in Columbus after the new year. November 9th. Yesterday was another challenging day to recount. Anthony's behavior continues to trouble me, and I'm starting to worry about how it will all unfold if I don't address it soon. Despite my efforts to focus on work, Anthony managed to enter my office unnoticed. When he attempted to kiss me, I hesitated before giving in momentarily. Regaining control, I pushed him away and retreated to the bathroom, overwhelmed with guilt and fear of Patrick's reaction if he ever found out. Anthony, unapologetic, left after expressing a desire for a repeat. Although upset, I managed to compose myself before Patrick arrived home, masking my distress as we conversed throughout the evening. Patrick, seething with anger, repeatedly reviewed the day's entry focusing on the Anthony incident. Despite this, he observed a notable absence of mentions regarding Anthony or their relationship in Glenda's diary for the following week, which somewhat relieved him. November 17th. I'm grappling with a confusing situation. Anthony's influence over me is stronger than I anticipated. I can't decipher if it's his demeanor or my own vulnerability, but I feel powerless around him. This afternoon, I confronted him about our previous encounter, emphasizing the inappropriateness of our connection, given my marital status and professional position. Despite my assertiveness, he exhibited unsettling behavior, suggesting we lock the office door and inviting me to join him on the couch. I can't explain why I agreed. We've crossed a dangerous line, and I'm torn between wanting to dismiss him from his role and justifying our actions. I can never confess to Patrick, and I'm relieved our indiscretions remain concealed, shielded by the privacy of my office. I hope to regain my composure before returning home. Patrick, troubled by the escalating situation, resolved to thoroughly read Glenda's diaries to better understand her. He revisited 2 pages once more, then glanced up to find it was already 2 a.m. Despite knowing there were numerous pages left, he couldn't set the book down. He left a message at work, indicating he'd be unavailable the next day due to personal matters. His life had irrevocably changed, leaving behind love and aspirations, replaced by a profound emptiness and mounting rage. Downing the last soda in the bathroom, he returned to his journal in the living room. Unaffected by caffeine, his mind raced, grappling with the weight of what he'd read. Glancing at his watch, he marveled at how just 8 hours ago he had conversed with Glenda, his suspicions yet to surface. November 22nd. Anthony stopped by the office today, but I maintained distance, keeping the desk between us. His behavior was appropriate. He didn't intrude or attempt to lock the door. My guilt prevented any further involvement with him. I sensed his recognition of my resolve to maintain boundaries, hoping to uphold it in the coming days. Glenda's mood was upbeat as the semester neared its end. November 23rd. I informed Patrick about the seminars, and he's supportive, even offering to accompany me. I'll consider his proposal, as it seems their dynamic shifted significantly from November 23rd to mid-December. November 25th. Anthony visited the office, expressing a desire to visit my home. Firmly declining, I emphasized that it wasn't an option. He inquired about Patrick's whereabouts, suggesting a visit to his residence. Rebuffing the idea, I reiterated my stance. Despite his persistence, he remained relatively usual in his behavior, expressing interest in the seminars despite their faculty-only status. November 30th. Yesterday weighed heavily on me. A day I struggled to recount. I feel utterly lost. Sleep evaded me, and Patrick sensed my distress. I wish I could confide in him, but the words elude me. Anthony haunts my dreams, though I harbor no affection for him. I'm tormented by memories of our encounters, questioning my inability to resist. I stood by as he locked the door, unable to protest. Throughout, my mind screamed for me to stop. After he left, tears streamed down my face as I dressed, consumed by regret. I spent the day locked in my office, grappling with my thoughts, considering therapy. Despite Glenda's evident remorse, Patrick couldn't fathom her actions, which deviated from her usual character. As he delved deeper into her journal, his disposition grew darker, unsettling those who knew him well. December 3rd. Anthony intercepted me in the hallway this morning, urging me to reconsider meeting him at his shared house. He desired closeness in a real bed, but I firmly refused, emphasizing the risk to my marriage and career. Undeterred, he proposed accompanying me to the January seminars, even offering to cover his expenses if I spent nights with him. I rejected his advances, but his suggestion lingered in my mind. I questioned my own weakness. Patrick, seething with anger, took a break to calm himself. He resisted the urge to drink, opting for clarity instead. Though he was certain of his next steps, he knew he needed a solid plan. Returning to the living room, he resumed reading his journal. December 7th. Anthony briefly visited my office to bid farewell before his Christmas trip home after his exam tomorrow. He inquired about returning early for the seminar, suggesting I might use it as a distraction. I postponed my decision, instructing him to call back in a few days. December 8th. Today, I misled Patrick, convincing him to stay home while I attend a seminar, proposing a cruise as a diversion. Despite his reluctance, he eventually relented. I feel guilty about deceiving him. Although I haven't committed to taking Anthony, I'm considering it, reflecting on our previous encounter in my office. Despite my contentment with Patrick, I inexplicably entertain thoughts of Anthony, valuing his experience. I await his call, pondering whether he'll persist or give up. December 12th. Anthony called, reiterating his desire to join me in Columbus. He proposed booking adjoining rooms, suggesting I pose him as my brother. He plans to confirm tomorrow and cover the room expense. Now, I'm faced with the decision of whether to consciously betray Patrick. December 14th. Anthony called again today, expressing excitement about our upcoming stay at the Sheraton. I reluctantly made the reservation, feeling guilty. He's leaving after the spring semester, no longer a TA. I hope I can resist further temptation. Anthony has a certain allure that intrigues me unlike anyone else. I fear Patrick discovering this. It would devastate him. December 28th. Anthony called me at home yesterday, using a code name in case Patrick answered. He confirmed our plans for New Year's Eve, and I reluctantly agreed. Deep down, I felt excitement too. I hoped this encounter would finally put an end to our affair. Patrick had to work, giving me an opportunity to arrange the trip. Although I'd never spent consecutive nights with the same man before marrying Patrick, I decided to go along with Anthony's proposal. I hoped it would disrupt my feelings. Patrick glanced at the time. It was nearly 5 a.m. He was close to finishing Glenda's diaries, but was determined to read them all, despite knowing she hadn't cheated. He needed certainty. With tasks ahead, he left the last page unread, opting for coffee. He could rest later. January 3rd. Tomorrow's the big day. I'm off for 3 days of seminars and nights with Anthony. I'll pick him up before leaving town and drop him off afterward. Luckily, Patrick didn't insist on joining. I got a map to ensure I find my way. I discovered a Victoria's Secret nearby, planning to buy outfits to wear with Anthony. I'm uneasy about it, but plan to wash them before seeing Patrick. I forgot to remind Anthony about contraceptives, but we can stop by the pills store before checking in. I'm surprisingly excited, though I worry about Anthony expecting new things. I'll save any new experiences for our cruise, framing it as adventure. I've started packing, hoping Patrick won't suspect anything. Reading my thoughts, I question if I can go through with it. What happened in my office was spontaneous, but this trip would be planned. I could refuse and cover Anthony's expenses, but I'm already feeling aroused at the thought. Patrick finished his 7th journal, contemplating all he'd read for the past 9 hours. He began to craft a plan for the next 3 days, convinced he was done with his marriage. Even if Glenda backed out of her arrangement with Anthony, trust was shattered. Forgiveness seemed out of reach as his love for her waned and his animosity toward Anthony surged. Before noon, he dialed a number on his computer screen. Pearsall Investigations, how can I help you? The professional tone of the woman who answered reassured him. Do you handle divorce cases? Patrick asked, uncertain of the term, but assuming it included his needs. If you mean investigating cheating spouses, then yes. Would you like to speak with an investigator? Her response put him at ease. Yes, please. I'm interested in your services, Patrick said. After a brief hold, a man's voice came on the line. This is John Pearsall. How can I assist you? Patrick wasted no time explaining his situation. I suspect my wife is having an affair with a man at the Sheraton Hotel near the airport. Can you provide photographic evidence and quote me a price? Patrick wasn't certain how to articulate his request precisely. The Sheraton, we can handle that. Is this ongoing? What's the time frame? Patrick settled in, explaining, my wife is currently there until Saturday morning. She's in room 412 and the man she's with is in 414 adjoining rooms. They were there last night too, but I only decided to take action this morning. She's attending seminars and he's accompanying her. He wondered if the investigator would catch the subtle irony. John Pearsall chuckled. Got it. Now, I need more details in your surveillance preferences. First, can you provide their names and descriptions? Patrick described his wife and offered to send a photo if needed. He'd found the firm online but preferred a direct conversation. He also provided Anthony's full name and a vague description from his wife's diary. It's straightforward, Mr. Dunn. We can set up cameras in their rooms this afternoon, keeping them there until after the weekend checkout. Installation is quick, and we have access to the rooms at a fixed rate per entry. If you only need photo evidence and no ongoing monitoring, the cost is a flat $800. Wouldn't using a single camera be cheaper? I just need confirmation they were together. I prefer to check tonight and receive the photos by tomorrow evening if they stayed overnight. We'll need cameras in both rooms since we're unsure which they'll use. Our cost covers quality equipment and access fees. Hiring a maintenance worker for 2 entries, installation and removal, adds $100. Apologies, I'm new to this. I'll pay upfront by credit card on your website. Great. Fill out the form noting case number 1372A. Once paid, I'll install the cameras and send you a DVD of the footage. Please provide your name and address for delivery. Patrick found the process straightforward, but receiving the DVD by mail wasn't practical. Could you hold on to the DVD until I reach out? Right now, I need photos showing they're together. Nothing explicit, just evidence of the affair. Understood, Mr. Dunn. I'll capture stills from the video feed. Patrick provided his phone number and made a credit card payment during the call. The investigator confirmed the payment and began camera installation. With the arrangement settled, Patrick finally gave in to sleep deprivation. After a nap and a quick meal, he resumed reading Glenda's diaries, progressing quickly without rereading or overthinking. As he finished the first volume, Glenda called shortly before 10 p.m. The conversation felt surprisingly easy, hiding their respective secrets. Patrick wondered if it was as effortless for Glenda to conceal her intentions as it was for him. With his plans in place, he found it easy to proceed. Yet, he wondered if he would ever regain a sense of normalcy. Before diving into the second volume, he double-checked his arrangements. Friday held additional tasks, including a visit to the bank to sort out finances. He'd already resigned from Anderson Electric, awaiting his final paycheck. It was well past 1 a.m. when he finished the second volume, taking longer than expected as thoughts of Glenda and Anthony lingered. His fatigue weighed heavily, prompting him to rest on the couch. Surprisingly, he dozed off and woke up at 7 a.m., refreshed. After a quick breakfast, he resumed reading, starting the third volume anew. By noon, he finished the third and fourth volumes, setting the diaries aside to tackle his to-do list. His first stop was Anderson Electric to collect his final paycheck and clear out his locker. Owner Gus Anderson tried to convince him to stay, but understanding Patrick's situation, he reluctantly bid him farewell, hoping he'd return someday. At the bank, paperwork delayed him, but he eventually left with a bag containing over $20,000 withdrawn from joint and personal accounts. Though he hoped for more, he could only access immediate funds without Glenda's signature. Arriving home around 4 p.m., he checked his answering machine and found a message from Pearsall Investigations. Gathering himself, he dialed John Pearsall's direct line. "This is John Pearsall. How can I assist you?" "Hello, this is Patrick Dunn. Were you able to install the cameras, and do you have any findings?" "Yes, Mr. Dunn. We set up cameras in both rooms yesterday afternoon and got the results today. Both rooms were empty during the operation, so it was swift." Patrick paused before asking, "Did anything significant show up on the footage?" He awaited John Pearsall's response with bated breath. "Well, Patrick, it's difficult to say, but your suspicions are validated. They spent the night together in your wife's room and engaged in carnal activities multiple times. I've transferred the video to DVD, and if you still want them, I can email you 3 frames as you requested." John's words brought tears to Patrick's eyes, surprising him. Despite what he had read, having visual evidence made the situation undeniably real. "Yes, please send the pictures. Thank you, Mr. Pearsall. If everything's settled financially, I consider our business concluded." "Yes, your payment settles the bill entirely. Are you feeling all right? Your voice sounds different today. Situations like this often bring emotional pain, and I'm concerned," John remarked, hearing a hint of worry in Patrick's voice. "I'm okay, thank you. I'll reach out if I need anything else," Patrick replied, his emotions under control, but with a noticeable edge of concern. "Your attorney may require a copy of the DVD, unless you pursue grounds other than infidelity for divorce. We'll retain it for a year or until instructed otherwise. Many clients find therapy beneficial in such circumstances. While not my expertise, a supportive therapist can make a significant difference," John suggested. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Pearsall." "I have a plan to cope with this. I appreciate your professionalism," Patrick said, ending the call before any further discussion could ensue. With a stoic expression, he remained seated at the kitchen table until the sound of an incoming email caught his attention. Quietly, he entered the room, housing the computer, and accessed the email from Pearsall Investigations. Reviewing each of the 3 attached photos, he promptly sent them to the printer, loaded with 8x10 photo paper. Within moments, tangible evidence of his wife's affair materialized in his hands. None of the photos depicted explicit acts, but one showing them lying together under a sheet bothered him the most. It marked a turning point for Patrick emotionally. After a final examination of the photos, Patrick placed them in a waiting brown envelope on the kitchen table. Returning to his chair, he resumed reading the 5th diary. Just before midnight, he concluded the last 2 volumes of Glenda's journals. Reflecting on the contents, Patrick realized how closely Glenda had adhered to his perceptions of her. While there were few surprises, the diaries unveiled numerous insights into their past, shedding light on previously unexplored facets of their relationship. He discovered that Glenda struggled with insecurity more than he had previously thought, evident from her journal entries. However, her profound love for him puzzled Patrick, making her actions with Anthony even more baffling. The only revelation was that their initial meeting at a birthday party wasn't coincidental. Glenda had orchestrated the encounter, expressing excitement at the prospect of reconnecting with him. Engrossed in reading the 2 volumes, Patrick realized afterward that Glenda hadn't called, and he was famished. As he prepared a sandwich and a drink, thoughts of Glenda and Anthony's interactions consumed him. These thoughts, combined with his decision, fueled his restlessness that night, whether due to the meal or the vivid images of Glenda and Anthony lingering in his mind whenever he closed his eyes. At 7 a.m, Patrick abandoned his attempt to rest and rose to begin his meticulously planned day. With a packed agenda ahead, he opted for an early start. By 8:30 a.m., he phoned his sole surviving close relative, his brother Samuel. While they weren't estranged, their interactions were infrequent, typically limited to obligatory holiday gatherings. Just 2 weeks earlier, Samuel, his wife Mary, and their children, Sam and Brenda, had visited. Patrick sensed Samuel's surprise at his unexpected morning visit, but found his brother and family available. Engaging himself until slightly past 10 a.m., Patrick eventually arrived at his brother's home. Aware of the children's eagerness to resume their tasks, he gathered them in the kitchen. As Mary brewed fresh coffee, Patrick and Samuel sat at the table. Recalling their recent Christmas gathering, Patrick remembered the family's upcoming trip to Disneyland during spring break. Delighted by the surprise, he gifted each child a crisp $100 bill, eliciting expressions of gratitude and warm embraces. "You really didn't have to do that, Patrick," remarked Samuel, "but it was kind of you to see them so happy. How are you holding up? Strike it rich in the lottery?" Patrick offered a faint smile. "No such luck. My fortune isn't worth boasting about. I just felt like being generous." They sat together at the kitchen table with coffee, engaging in casual conversation. Mary chimed in, "I suppose I can skip skirting around the topic of your big plans with Glenda?" She mentioned your desire to start a family. "I know you'll embrace parenthood as much as we do." Patrick paused before responding. "She shared that with you, huh? Women don't seem to hold much back." Before Mary could interject, Patrick redirected the discussion, asking his brother about his work as a restaurant manager. After their coffee cups were empty, Patrick stood to leave. "Just in case I don't see you until next Christmas, take care." He quickly shook his brother's hand and gave Mary a brief hug. "I'll keep you in my thoughts." With those words, he walked away, exchanging farewells as he reached his car. Watching Patrick depart, Samuel turned to Mary. "Wonder what's on his mind?" He seemed preoccupied, but not up for conversation. Mary shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. "Probably just biding time until Glenda returns from her course. She mentioned she'd be back tonight." Hand in hand, they strolled back to the house, discussing their plans for the remainder of the day. Just before 6 o'clock in the evening, Glenda Dunn arrived home, noticing Patrick's absence as she entered through the kitchen. She had rehearsed their reunion, but found herself flustered by his absence. However, she saw it as an opportunity to unpack and do laundry. Contemplating another shower, she passed the kitchen table and spotted a note pinned down by a salt shaker signed by Patrick, explaining his sudden absence due to work. Although slightly disappointed, the note allowed her to proceed with her plans. Afterward, she headed upstairs, opting for a relaxing bath instead of a shower. While gathering laundry, she spotted her journal on the dresser. She recalled leaving her journal in her emergency bag and retrieved it, relieved to find it untouched. Originally planning to update it during her trip, she forgot it until Patrick reminded her of its location. Finding it where she left it, she decided to update it while doing laundry. As her clothes washed, she made a quick meal and tried calling Patrick, only to realize his phone was in the wicker basket. Retrieving it, she sighed, realizing her rhetorical question had no answer. Returning to the table, she unlocked her diary with a key from her wallet and began writing on the first blank page. On January 7th, the most eventful 4 days of my life just concluded, and I need to document everything, even if it's unpleasant. When I picked up Anthony, he seemed eager. During the drive, he made advances that bothered me, but he stopped after I warned him about being seen. As we got farther from the city, I relaxed. At the mall, he hurried to join me at Victoria's Secret, suggesting items I ended up buying. I wore one set for him Wednesday night, but I disposed of it before leaving the store this morning. I've decided to discard the other sets too, not wanting reminders of my time at the Sheraton. I can't erase the memories, but I'll try to move on. On Wednesday night, Anthony came to my room and we quickly became in bed. After that, I understood the vast difference between physical desire and genuine love. I ended things with Anthony, but he didn't take it well. Despite my attempts to avoid conflict, he became angry. We agreed to sleep on it, but I already started planning how to make amends with Patrick. Friday morning, Anthony ignored my refusal and persisted. I locked the connecting door between our rooms, but he made plans with someone else that night. Witnessing him with another woman, I realized he preys on vulnerable women like me. It was a relief not to argue with him, but I felt ashamed for falling into his trap. I dreaded the ride home with Anthony, but it surprisingly went smoothly. Seeing him for who he truly was gave me control over our interaction. He behaved decently and accepted my decision to end things. As we drove, I resolved to seek therapy to understand and overcome my vulnerability to him. I'm determined to ensure I never betray Patrick again. I've also committed to making amends with him, even if he never learns the truth. Additionally, I've decided to stop taking birth control and embrace the possibility of having children. After finishing her lengthy journal entry, Glenda used the pen as a bookmark, left the book on the table, and headed upstairs to prepare a bath. Bringing the cordless phone along in case Patrick called, she filled the tub to the proper level and added bath oil, then lit some candles before easing herself into the warm water. Relaxing, she closed her eyes, nearly drifting off to sleep. Sensing she was being observed, she cautiously glanced around, but found no one in the bedroom. Resuming her relaxation, she pondered how to mend things with Patrick after her misguided involvement with Anthony. An hour later, feeling rejuvenated, she returned to the kitchen. After transferring the laundry to the dryer, she returned to the table to review her journal entry. Momentarily puzzled by the absence of the pen from the book, she remembered leaving it there, but then spotted it on the kitchen table near the wicker basket. Retrieving it, she opened her diary to read once more. On Sunday morning, Glenda rose feeling rejuvenated and eager to embark on a new chapter of her life. After dedicating the morning to cleaning, she showered and donned an ensemble she knew Patrick admired. By mid-afternoon, she was seated at the kitchen table, enjoying a cup of coffee while a sizable roast cooked in the oven, when a knock at the side door interrupted her tranquility. Her surprise turned to alarm upon seeing two burly men outside. One, a young uniformed policeman with a hand resting on his holstered pistol. The other, slightly older and attired in a suit and coat, held a police ID. "I'm Detective Rankin, and this is Officer Reynolds from the Springfield Police Department. We're looking for Patrick Dunn. Is he home?" Glenda's face relaxed with relief as she assured them, "Patrick's at work right now. I was worried when I saw you. I'm his wife, by the way. Maybe I can assist you," she added quickly. After a brief exchange of glances, Detective Rankin suggested, "Maybe we should step inside. It's a bit chilly out here." Glenda welcomed them, stepping back to allow entry. "Sure, come on in," she said, leading them into the kitchen. "Why are you looking for Patrick?" she inquired, a tinge of concern returning to her expression. "He's not injured, is he?" she added anxiously. Detective Rankin reassured her promptly. No, nothing like that. As far as we know, your husband is perfectly fine. We just need to speak with him about a case we're working on." "Are you certain your husband is at work?" "Of course I am." She went to the counter, retrieved the note Patrick had left, and handed it to the detective. "You can read his message for yourself. It was there when I returned from my trip last night." Officer Reynolds positioned himself at the counter, keeping watch over the back entrance and the kitchen, his hand still resting on his weapon. After reading the note, he returned it to the detective. "May I keep this, Mrs. Dunn?" Glenda shook her head, and the detective placed the note in his briefcase. Glenda's curiosity got the best of her as she nervously inquired, "Why do you need to speak with Patrick? What interest could the police possibly have in him? He's never been in any trouble." The detective responded, "This morning we received a homicide call. The call was traced to your husband's cell phone. We're working with his carrier to determine his whereabouts at the time." Relief washed over Glenda. "You must have made a mistake. I tried calling my husband last night when I got home, but I found his cell phone here." She pointed to a wicker basket on the kitchen table. The detective looked skeptical. "May I check his cell phone?" He walked to the basket, examined it briefly, then picked it up and returned to the table. "I don't see any cell phone here, Mrs. Dunn." "Are you certain you're not mistaken about the timing? Maybe it wasn't yesterday." Glenda's shocked expression confirmed the basket was indeed empty. Despite the obvious lack of anything else on the counter, she searched around in disbelief. "I don't get it. His phone was here when I tried calling him last night," she explained, frustration and concern evident as she looked from the officer to the detective. "Well, I can't explain why the phone isn't where you say it should be, Mrs. Dunn. It seems the call traced to your husband's cell phone was indeed made from it," the detective stated, making a note in his folder. "Is your husband acquainted with Anthony Romano?" Glenda was taken aback by the mention of the name, her face briefly paling. "I know Anthony Romano, but my husband doesn't. Anthony was my assistant last semester," she clarified. After a quick exchange of glances, the detective continued. "So, your husband had no reason to dislike Mr. Romano? Are you absolutely sure he didn't know him?" Glenda's panic grew as she replied, "No, Patrick never met Anthony." The detective made a few more notes before looking back at her. "Well, it seems your husband knew Mr. Romano well enough to make the call reporting him eliminated," he stated. Glenda, shocked, sat down at the table and exclaimed, "Anthony is dead. I brought him home with me yesterday around 5:30. How could he be dead?" Detective Rankin took a seat across from her and inquired, "What was your relationship with Mr. Romano? Could there have been a motive for your husband's involvement?" Glenda's complexion paled as the detective spoke. After a moment, she regained composure and stated, "Anthony was just a high school student. Neither my assistant nor my husband would have any reason to injure him." Despite her words, her tone lacked conviction. The detective let her stew in silence for nearly half a minute before speaking again. "Upon arriving at the address provided by your husband, we found evidence of an attack on Mr. Romano as he entered his home. A travel bag lay in the hallway, along with footprints indicating a struggle. It seems Mr. Romano lost the altercation and was dragged to the kitchen, where he was bound to a chair with nylon straps commonly used for electrical wires." As the detective described the scene at Anthony's house, Glenda began to weep softly. "Mr. Romano was shot in the left knee before being dragged into the kitchen. The medical examiner suspects a major artery was hit due to significant blood loss. Autopsy results are pending, but it appears Mr. Romano sustained multiple blows before succumbing to a single fire shot to the head," the detective continued. "Preliminary forensics also suggest he was shot in the groin post-mortem, a non-fatal wound. The estimated time of pass-away falls between 6 and 8 last evening." At this juncture, Glenda interjected, stating, "Patrick could never commit such an act. That's not who he is." Her tears had nearly subsided, replaced by evident anger. The detective consulted his notes before pressing on. "According to state records, your husband possesses a permit for a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. One of the bullets recovered from the chair matches this caliber, tentatively linking it to his weapon. The motive remains unclear." Detective Rankin rifled through his folder, eventually producing 3 photocopies, which he laid out on the table before Glenda. "These are copies of 3 photos discovered at the crime scene. Their positioning near Mr. Romano suggests he was shown them before his demise. Blood splatter indicates their presence at the time of the fatal shot. I don't believe you've been entirely forthcoming about your connection with Anthony Romano or your husband's involvement with him," the detective asserted. Glenda took the photocopies, her expression shifting to one of shock as she examined them. As the realization sank in, she began to sob uncontrollably, insisting, "No, Patrick couldn't have known." Just as the detective prepared to elaborate on the crime scene details, his cell phone rang. Throughout the 3-minute call, he remained mostly silent, jotting notes in his pad. Meanwhile, Glenda's crying subsided, leaving her sitting quietly with her hands covering her face, tears streaming down. After finishing his notes, the detective glanced up at Glenda and relayed, "Your husband's call was traced to Windsor, Ontario. Local authorities collaborated with a cell phone provider to locate his device, discovered in a bag containing credit cards and a .25 caliber pistol registered to him." The The bag was found in a trash receptacle at the Walmart parking lot. Neither he nor his vehicle were spotted, although plates matching his car were found in the trash. They suspect he might have swapped plates to blend in with Ontario traffic. The news failed to console Glenda, who remained seated at her desk, crying inconsolably. After observing her for a few minutes, the detective retrieved another photocopy from his folder and presented it to her. It depicted a small brass key alongside a ruler. "There was a key in the photos. Its significance is unclear. Do you recognize it?" Glenda examined the image and swiftly retrieved her purse. Within moments, she produced a matching key from her wallet, holding it next to the photo. At that moment, she lost control, slumping in her chair. Her only utterances were diary and Patrick. The two men stayed with her for nearly 15 minutes, waiting for her to regain composure. Eventually, they persuaded her to call someone for support. After ensuring her sister would arrive promptly, they departed. As they headed to their cars, Officer Reynolds inquired, "Do you think they'll catch him soon?" "It hinges on how well he can evade capture. He hasn't committed any crimes in Canada for the past 2 weeks, so their police may not prioritize his search. He's not a serial executioner. If he evades detection, his chances of being apprehended diminish over time. If he remains at large in 6 months, we might seek TV publicity through most wanted shows, as they've yielded results," the detective explained. Officer Reynolds paused to consider the response before posing another question. "What do you make of her story about the cell phone? She seemed genuine when she said it was there last night." "Yeah, I agree. I don't think she was lying or mistaken. My hunch is he returned but didn't go through with his plan. While here, he likely spotted his cell phone and decided to take it." The officer appeared puzzled. "But if he was here, why wouldn't he inform her? It's odd he'd return only for the cell phone." Detective Rankin halted, fixing the young man with a look. "Think about it. Patrick Dunn just eliminated her lover and he's coming home. The only reason he'd come back, as far as I can see, is to liquidate her and perhaps himself. I don't know what changed his mind, but I doubt he merely returned for his cell phone." Reynolds nodded thoughtfully, digesting the detective's words. Eventually, he remarked, "I think Mrs. Dunn will eventually realize how close she came to losing her life and question why she didn't. I wonder how she'll feel about it."